In 2002, the gaming world was graced by the release of Tetsuya Nomura's Kingdom Hearts, a quirky little JRPG that was a strange combination of both Final Fantasy and Disney, a mix that, oddly enough, proved to be successful, and so Square, likely realizing the game's potential, took the next logical step, and they made it a series. But wait, hold up, don't get too excited there, because this is where shit starts to get a little complicated. 2 years after the release of Kingdom Hearts, a Japanese studio called Jupiter, in collaboration with Square Enix, released a game for the Game Boy Advance called Kingdom Hearts Chain of Memories. It was a decent game that was met with generally positive reviews, however, it proved to be what is still the least financially successful game in the series. Now, that's all fine and dandy, but where that actually became a problem is when gamers didn't quite realize that Chain of Memories wasn't actually a spin-off title, but a continuation of the first game. Not quite a direct sequel like 2 was, but still important to the story, as Chain of Memories had quite a lot of important details that would fill the gap between Kingdom Hearts 1 and 2. Now, if you were like me, you initially skipped out entirely on Chain of Memories for a few possible reasons, such as not having a Game Boy, not thinking the game was important, or not even being aware of it. But alas, Chain of Memories came and went, and on March 26, 2006 in North America, the day finally came. After years of waiting for a sequel, we got the definitive game of the franchise, Kingdom Hearts 2. Yeah, now this was Kingdom Hearts. The wait was absolutely worth it, and there is a good reason so many folks consider this to be the best game in the franchise. Like any good sequel, it took the foundations that its precursor created and built upon it, taking it to all new heights. The gameplay was greatly expanded upon, with combat and controls feeling much more tight, energetic, acrobatic, and visually spectacular. And that's really the best word I can use to describe Kingdom Hearts 2. Spectacle. Absolutely everything is kicked up to max. From Yoko Shimomura's returning score with a powerful and dramatic orchestra, to the story which brings the series to a new level of depth and maturity, with new characters with fully realized personalities and arcs. If you are anything like me, you will love just about everything that Kingdom Hearts 2 brought to the table. It's dramatic, funny, bittersweet, happy, and enjoyable like nothing else. I love this game. Kingdom Hearts 1 may have been a turning point in gaming for me as a child, but Kingdom Hearts 2 means something else to me, which is why I'm so ecstatic to be sharing that with you all today. But enough sentimentality for a bit. Unlike my last video, I actually want to start with the story this time around. When we start the game we've waited for so long, new players at launch were probably confused as to why we begin the journey not as Sora, but a newly introduced character named Roxas. The game's first few hours take place from Roxas' perspective, as he spends the last few days of summer vacation with his friends in Twilight Town. Here you participate in a local sporting competition, do odd jobs for money, explore the town's supposed 7 wonders, and sit in suspiciously dangerous locations while eating sea salt ice cream, among a few other things. And to somebody who has never played the game before, all of this opening, especially one with quite limited combat, builds up this particular anticipation for the rest of the game. Nobody really knows who this guy is, but we are occasionally seeing flashes of scenes from the original game. Is Sora even playable? As the days go by, more strange occurrences begin to happen to Roxas as he slowly loses his grip on reality. He, like Sora, comes into possession of a Keyblade. Time seems to freeze around him, strange men appearing out of the darkness. His whole world changing so fast he can't control it. What's real and what isn't. And all this finally culminates in the opening's final scene where Roxas, at the end of his journey, finally meets Sora as his other half, where he smiles, accepting the path laid out before him, and rejoins with Sora. And thus, we finally take control of Sora once more, really beginning Kingdom Hearts 2. Say what you will about the slow opening hours, some folks don't exactly like playing as Roxas, but I find him to be one of the most compelling characters in the whole series. His story is an emotional tragedy where you can sympathize with everything that he is going through throughout the game, and where you can genuinely feel for his situation in the end. Even if it only takes a couple of hours to get through, I feel like you get the added bonus of having a story that comes full circle in those first few hours alone, though it does become important to Sora's story as the main game progresses as well. But hey, we're playing as Sora now, so that's still awesome. I don't necessarily know when it was decided that Kingdom Hearts was going to become a series, at least relative to the launch of Kingdom Hearts 1, but regardless, I've always felt that Kingdom Hearts 1 was pretty self-contained. Sure, it ends on a bit of a cliffhanger, and the ending is perhaps a bit bittersweet, but it wraps most loose ends up pretty well, and, well, being the first game doesn't exactly have any prerequisites that somebody would need to know to make sense of it. This sort of leads into world building. Kingdom Hearts establishes its world fairly well in its first entry by telling you about the different concepts that make up its world, such as what the Heartless are, what each in-game world is, who key figures of good and evil are, other inhabitants and their own quests and goals, and so on. The first game leaves it fairly simple, but it does enough to make you feel that you are interacting with a place not of our own reality. And then Kingdom Hearts 2 struts up and knocks that shit up to 11. I don't think it's an outlandish concept to say that any good sequel should build upon not just the foundations of its predecessor in gameplay, but story and world building as well. Kingdom Hearts 2 adds to the world building in the first game by a number of means. New and returning levels expand upon what we already knew existed in the Kingdom Hearts universe by either seeing old friends again and seeing what they are up to this time around, or meeting new people entirely. We are introduced to both the Nobodies and Organization 13, that is if you never played Chain of Memories. Certain events that occurred in the first game now have varying outcomes and consequences, and new storylines are introduced as well. And since the world is now so much larger for both the gamers and the characters, it also tries to replicate that scale for its story. After all, what's the point of these upscales and improvements if the story isn't included in that growth as well? When the world as we know it is now larger, then the stakes are now larger as well. In the first game, you know the Heartless are an obstacle, but the real goal is to find your friends and Mickey. Although Ansem was the main villain of the game, you don't even learn he is the villain until the final act of the game. Therefore, the overall threat doesn't feel nearly as imminent, even when compared to the scale of the game's world itself. But in Kingdom Hearts 2, the villain Xemnas scales up with its world building, and is made much sooner evident than Ansem was, so his presence and threat feels that much greater and imposing. Now, while the story is arguably the best in the series, it's here where things get complicated again. I mentioned earlier the issue with different console releases and not knowing what was a spin-off and what was actually important, starting with Chain of Memories. Note, it's all important. But the console issue wasn't the only issue with Kingdom Hearts, it was the convolutedness of the series that really started with this game. It excelled in its world-building improvements, but with some awkward writing and a lot of people not playing Chain of Memories, it could seem like Kingdom Hearts 2 throws a lot of information at you all at once. But if you take the time to pay attention to what characters tell you and absorb all of that into your brain, I promise you it is only really hard to explain to other people, not to understand it yourself. You'll do just fine if you pay attention and remember a lot of info. But if you can get past all that complicated shit, then great, because no matter what, Kingdom Hearts 2 will punch you right in the feels. I already talked about how great the prologue is, but even once you get past that, the story does everything in its power to make you care and love everything it throws at you. Everyone is so much more fleshed out and emotive, and everything that happens around you is so much more dramatic, but the characters are all so wonderful that even when things get stupid, you still love it. At least I did. Like the story, the gameplay of Kingdom Hearts 2 is also something of a beast. Back in Kingdom Hearts 1, combat was challenging and fun, but a bit on the clunky side. Sora wasn't nearly as mobile or maneuverable, and a missed swing on an enemy might be more of a nuisance than it might be in any other game as a result. This time around, you have Sora doing all sorts of crazy stunts and what eventually just becomes a super long and intense game of the floor is lava. The controls are much snappier and responsive, with far more variety, making combat more visually interesting, intuitive, and interactive than before. And in my own opinion, I feel this makes Kingdom Hearts 2 a much easier game than its predecessor, at least on standard difficulty. The added gameplay functionality like more reaction commands and drive forms and the like on top of the faster-paced gameplay might seem like a lot more to handle, especially when the game throws larger hordes of enemies at you with more variety. One might feel that the game is trying to up the challenge by making players adapt to the new features by throwing more at them, and thus giving the players more to have to learn. However, I found that more often than not, in taking my time to kill everything and doing as much of the side content as I could, I was very evenly leveled or over-leveled against everything I fought, making the majority of the game a breeze. The added reaction commands and drive forms only amplified my means of bypassing challenges that might have been more challenging without. That being said, faster-paced combat means you need to have faster-paced reaction timing. Enemies no longer have slow wind-ups to their attacks to match the speed of battle like with the first game, and now will come at you with everything they have, especially bosses. Of course, there are exceptions to this, but generally speaking, you'll need to be much more intently on your toes to make sure enemies don't get the upper hand on you. The Organization 13 bosses are particularly tough, being the main antagonists of the game and all, but like Kingdom Hearts 1, optional hidden bosses are still available that'll kick your butt just as easily as they likely did before. With action commands being far more relevant and more attacks being attached to the square button this time around, the control scheme is more expanded upon compared to what is available in the first game. And if you watch my video on Kingdom Hearts 1, I defend the idea that the game is more than just an X-mashing simulator that everyone likes to joke about. This helps add to the versatility of the combat as well. With an expanded variety of new equipable abilities, your playstyle can now be more custom-tailored to your own needs more than ever. For general presentation, I don't have a whole lot to add, but it's worth a quick look as well. Graphically, I'm pretty amazed at just how much a few years difference can make for a series, even within the same console. I always thought the original Kingdom Hearts looked pretty good for its time, but Kingdom Hearts 2 looks even better than the original. The animations are better, and the weird complaint I had about lip syncing in the first game isn't nearly as prevalent or noticeable this time around. This was probably one of the better looking games to have come out that year, tied perhaps with Resident Evil 4, Devil May Cry 3, and Shadow of the Colossus. All PS2 games. Kingdom Hearts 2 is obviously more cartoony than the other examples, but it still managed to hold its own graphically by having good models, animations, textures, etc. The voice acting is even better this time around as well, with some voice actors really nailing emotional performances. I already love Quentin Flynn for a number of his roles, but he's particularly a standout here. Kingdom Hearts 2, while marking the start of some particular issues in the writing department, is still a game that can be enjoyed despite that, especially with vast improvements with the gameplay, and even after a decade it can still make me emotional and keep me glued to my TV. If KH2 is as big of an improvement over its predecessor as it is, then 3 has a bigger mark to surpass as well. 2 also cemented itself within gamers as something that is far from over as a series, and as we all know, would continue to spawn more sequels. It's hard to imagine how Kingdom Hearts would be as a franchise had 2 turned out differently, but even with its minor flaws, I'd say we got the best possible outcome for a game than what people could have imagined and hoped for. And I doubt any newcomers to the series will find this to be a disappointing entry by a long shot. And with the series more accessible than ever, this game is the one I most anticipate for newcomers to reach. I know they'll have an incredible time, and hopefully hop on the bandwagon for more Kingdom Hearts 3 hype. And with that, thanks for listening to my long and hopefully cohesive rant on a game I enjoy, and I'll see you all in the next video.